What happens when success is no longer enough? What happens when all the skills, experience, achievements, and strategies that once made you successful suddenly stop helping? In the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna was one of the greatest warriors of his time. He was disciplined, respected, highly capable, and yet, standing on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, he collapsed. Not because he lacked talent, not because he lacked experience, but because the pressure became greater than his inner clarity. And perhaps that is a battle many leaders quietly face today. From the outside, everything looks successful, but internally, there is burnout, overwhelm, identity confusion, fear, exhaustion. In today's episode of Beyond the Battlefield, we explore what happens when life forces us to stop performing and start transforming. Our guest is Savio P. Clemente, a TEDx speaker, journalist, board-certified wellness coach, healthcare leadership strategist, best-selling author, and creator of the Adaptive Resilience Leadership Framework. After interviewing thousands of leaders and rebuilding his own life after surviving cancer not once, but twice, Savio has dedicated his work to helping leaders navigate disruption, pressure, recovery, and the hidden performance decline that often follows a crisis. In this conversation, we explore suffering, surrender, resilience, identity, stillness, decision-making under pressure, and why performance rarely fails first. Clarity does. So join us as we discover what the Bhagavad Gita, modern leadership, and one extraordinary human journey can teach us about finding strength when life doesn't go according to plan. Welcome to Beyond the Battlefield.
Savio, welcome to Beyond the Battlefield. Really appreciate your time and thank you very much for joining us today. Savio, you work around adaptive resilience, emotional regulation, burnout recovery. You have been twice cancer survivor, right? And you work for leadership under pressure, which very well aligns with the Bhagavad Gita's deeper teaching on inner stability, awareness, identity, surrender, as well as conscious actions, right? So in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna's collapse did not happen because he lacked skill. It happens because internally he became overwhelmed. He had strength, experience, he was trained, he was having perfect clarity before coming to this battlefield. But in one emotional, intense moment, his nervous system collapsed. And honestly, many modern leaders I had seen experience something very similar today. So you have spoken openly about surviving cancer twice, on burnout recovery, and what you call adaptive resilience. So my first question to you is, what did suffering teach you about leadership that success never could taught us?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me on your podcast. I really appreciate it, Ankur. I think it goes back to my general thesis, which is performance doesn't fail first, clarity does. And in your example with Arjuna and the Bhagavad Gita, it is true. When pressure mounts, and I deal with a lot with healthcare leadership, you cannot see your way through because it's often not only fuzzy from the external, but your internal is not regulated. And so suffering for me and having both cancer battles and their survival really taught me that at the end of the day, there's not so much I can control, but also that even though I cannot control those things, I have the power, the foresight, the insight, the will, the desire to actually surrender to the process that's actually happening to me, for me, however you want to contextualize that. I think it's important when anything like disruption, adversity, pain, suffering, discomfort comes into our lives. I think it's really important to have perspective and to not be so attached and also not so detached to the outcome.
So we talk about attachment as well as we also talk about surrender. And if you look into Bhagavad Gita, the deepest learning or the real learning start when Arjun said that I'm confused and I can't fight and I'm putting my weapons down and I'm surrendering to you. Help me out. And the other point what you said is about attachment. We have talked a lot about attachment and Bhagavad Gita. The first 3-4 chapters, second and third chapter totally talked about how you can remain detached to the outcome and still committed to the dharma or to the role you are in. So one of the deepest moment in Bhagavad Gita is when Arjuna says, my mind is confused about my dharma, my path, everything, right? And he wasn't confused about strategy at that time. We all know that he was a very good warrior. He has not lost any single war in life, but he was confused about himself. And I've also seen many leaders, executive today, are not struggling with workload alone. They are struggling with identity, maybe burnout, crisis, worrying about failures. And then they are also worried that, if this thing will go away, who will be, right? So your illness has forced you to meet a version of yourself. And did you realize that the achievement what you have got will have help you to meet that part of your version?
Well, thank you for explaining that so clearly and so succinctly. I think it's important to go back to ancient texts and to actually see how they can inform our modern lives. It reminds me actually of my own study. I grew up Catholic. I studied various Jewish mysticism, also studied Vedic traditions. And in Vedic traditions, they really teach this idea of not actually expecting, but allowing, not actually thirsting, but satisfying and satiating, and being more present-minded. For me, when it comes to this realm of suffering through illness, I often tell people that my story is very dramatic. Two-time cancer survivor, not too many people can say that. And I also respect and understand that the path is not the same for everyone, because even though I survived, I've now lost about 9 people to cancer. But this could be in any realm: job loss, infidelity, divorce, business collapse. The world as we know, with disruption politically, socially, and with AI, is really causing us to really figure out for ourselves, what do we actually want? And how do we actually allow life to give that to us? It reminds me so deeply about Eastern philosophy. They often speak about this idea that the river does not rush. The seed underneath the soil does not rush, that it has its own trajectory. It has its own inner workings. And the more that we try to rush that, we don't allow the unfoldment to happen. As you know, with the lotus flower, it grows in the mud. That's how it forms into the beautiful self that it is. And same thing with a butterfly. It has to go through the chrysalis. It has to go through the change. And so I would like to just tell anyone who's listening or viewing this show to really understand that no matter what life throws at you, I deal with healthcare leaders that have high stakes and high pressure. For them, it's not just about themselves or about their team or organization. It's about another human being. And that's a lot of cognitive load and cognitive pressure that is being forced upon and thrust upon them and us in that moment to decide, how do we move forward? I think when it comes to anything that's being thrown at us, in the case of Arjuna, the ability to admit and to allow and to be present in that. Because oftentimes with the leaders that I deal with, they not only deal with their identity, but their role. And they feel like their role dictates who they are. But their role is only a fraction of what life is trying to unfold for them. So I think it's really to be honest with yourself, to really put down the masks, because all of us have it, and to really allow both the experience and the lesson to coexist at the same time. I think all of us are trying to get to the answer rather than trying to allow life to show us what particular thing needs to be addressed in this moment. Not all moments, but this particular one.
Yeah, and that is what we say. Bhagavad Gita explain what is right now. And one of the metaphor you said about lotus, I'll just add on this. Lotus grows in mud, but there is another beautiful property of lotus, which you explained in the last discussion, that it doesn't soak water, still he grow in the water. So even though water falls, it pass through it, but it doesn't soak. And that's what Krishna has used the same metaphor 5,000 years back, how lotus leaf grows. And the lotus leaf, so the learning is, and you very well explained that, when anything comes, whether it is mud or water, you have to go through that pressure, that situation, but don't cling to that. If you are going through something, you don't cling to that. And another example, you talked about river, and which I follow very well. There are multiple ways we can learn from the nature. One of the way you explain that life is like you have to flow like a river. You don't decide. If river has decided which path she will follow, and what happens when there is a high story building on the way. So river doesn't decide what will happen, where she will take a turn, where there will be uphill, where there will be downhill. It will just flow and create and find a way for it. That is something which, I had seen that when it comes to decision making under pressure, and you work a lot of uh, you do a lot of work around that. You talk many things about it, right? And even in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna's guidance to Arjun was very fascinating, because he has never asked Arjuna to run away from the battlefield. Many times I had seen, I was going through one of the book where it was mentioned about Thomas Waldo Emerson, who has traveled to Europe to learn Bhagavad Gita, but in the second chapter he closed the book, and many thinkers have closed the book and said that what kind of God is he? He's asking his follower to kill his family. No God does that. So Arjuna was wanted to run away from that pressure, and Krishna was making sure that you need to be there. You need to be in the battlefield. And what he does, he transforms the inner state. Now, help us to understand, what do leaders misunderstand today about pressure? Why the pressure is seen like an something which is much more bigger thing in the life, while you only said that lotus grows in the mud. But how do we take it practically?
So most leadership really focuses on this idea that you need to survive the crisis. But that's not where you win or lose. It's after the crisis. How you reorientate, how you recalibrate, how do you actually figure out for yourself, who am I in the context of this situation? Who do I want to be in the context of my role or my identity in said business or said endeavor? I think it's really important for people to realize that when crisis hits and that decision quality loosens or doesn't even begin to fully address what's actually happening within, I think we really need to first figure out for ourselves, how do we regulate with this new bit of information? What is our body actually telling us? So I'm a board certified health and wellness coach. And so a lot of my work with coaching is also not about what's actually happening in terms of the mind and the actual cognitive overload that's happening, but how do we actually release that into the body and allow us to be more embodied and more somatic with the process? So what is the body actually giving us in terms of information? And what is it actually telling us that we need to do in terms of further steps? So I relate this to my TEDx talk. I did a TEDx talk before my cancer relapse. So I was diagnosed with cancer in 2014, stage 3 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I was cancer-free for a decade. And then in June of 2024, I had a cancer relapse and I had to go through a stem cell transplant, 29 days in the hospital. I lost 26 pounds. And all in those moments I had, Ankur, was silence and stillness. And you know the beauty of that. But mine wasn't a choice. It was a forced experience because I was in a quarantine room in a hospital bed. I was experiencing tachycardia. My pulse would go to 160, 170. I was rushed to the ICU. But in those moments, those two anchors were stillness and silence. And in that, there was a beauty. There was this ability to actually figure out for myself, who is suffering? What is the metacognition in the thinking of the thinking? Who is the identity of the person who's being visited every 4 hours to do vitals, every day with the care team doing their rounds? Who is that person? And who is the one who still has mental acuity, whose still emotions are still alive, whose still spirit still wants to get through this somehow? And I figured out for myself a few things. One, not only did I need to surrender, but I needed to submit to what's happening to me. And like most people, most of us don't want to submit to much in life. But in that moment, that was the only choice I had. Then I also reframed. Instead of seeing the chemo as poison, I saw it as an elixir, as mana from the universe, as life force, because it was scientifically and medically designed to do a task. And if I don't allow that, if I don't allow and still get caught up in the fear, then what are we doing here? And then I also met my doctors where they were, because they weren't just healing me, we were healing each other. They were actually giving me the tools necessary in order to see for myself, how can I use what's available to me, feel into the discomfort, feel into the pain, the sorrow, the longing, which is constant in our lives. And how can I actually bring that into a more adaptive ability? So adaptive resilience was something that I actually held on to, because even in the moments of SHIT, the nasty and awful moments of feeling like you are floating away or not really being yourself, how can I make the strategies or figure out for myself what is my next steps forward in this situation? Yes, this is happening to me. I need to be realistic about it. But in most situations, people often get confused and think they have to have a identity for someone else, that they have to be something for someone else, when in truth, all they have to do is be truthful with themselves. I can share with you because you share the same philosophies I do about learning and living and all the ancient truths. And one of my favorite books is Autobiography of a Yogi. As you know, Paramahansa Yogananda was a great master. And in that, actually, there's a story that most people don't know about the Mahavatar Babaji. And in that story, it's really fascinating because apparently a very well-to-do older gentleman wanted to find Babaji and his tribe. And so he sought out high and low in the crags in the mountains. This is an actual story that was told to many. And he, through the pain, the suffering, the environment, he actually finds Babaji and the tribe. And he says, Master, I've come to you. I've been through so much in my life. I want to join your merry tribe. And Babaji just says no. And he says, but Master, I've come so far. You don't know what I've been through. Babaji says no. So he then says, if you don't accept me into your tribe, I will jump off this cliff and I will die. And Babaji goes, okay. And so the man decides to do that. He jumps and Babaji's tribe goes, Master, why'd you do that? He could have joined our tribe. That's almost like murder. Why didn't you just allow him to do that? And so Babaji says, okay, go fetch the body. So his tribe fetches the mangled body, and with one touch, Babaji touches the body, and the mangled body springs back to life. And then Babaji says to the person, it was now that you actually proved your devotion. And so I think it's important, no matter what life shows you, what are you devoted to? Devotion doesn't have to mean a spiritual entity or some remote, distant hierarchy. Devotion is in how you speak, how you go about your day-to-day. How do you go about trying to wrestle with humanity and the challenges that have faced you? So I tell this story to your audience because to me, it touched me very deeply, and it really brought the truth of what life is. One of the things I learned very early on, and this was not my own teaching, it's something I learned, was when you're faced with truth and there's an error in the truth, you don't discard the truth, you discard the error. The truth is the truth. It's the big T, not the small t. And so I share that.
Excellent story. And I had started that book reading a couple of months back, but then I went into this. But I know this story, and it is very touchy story. Every time I listen, and you had given another perspective to this thing. But when you're talking about your time into hospital, stillness, and silence, one thing which came in my mind, which most of us misunderstand, and Bhagavad Gita explain and Krishna keep on telling multiple times to Arjun that whatever you see yourself and others, you are not there. You had been to multiple lives before and after as well. What you are is a witness, and this is just a role. And there is one beautiful story about there was a small kid in a village. He has never been to a movie theater, and his father promised that I'll take you to a movie next Sunday. Unfortunately, they went the theater 5 minutes late. The movie was already started, and that kid started saying that, Dad, where's the movie? And the dad said, this is what you see is movie. He said, no, they are the real people. So the learning is that we have never seen the blank screen. What we have seen is a projection. What you and me are projection. Every time when we go through a good experience, we are happy, but we don't want to leave that experience, and we don't accept that there can be an opposite as well. And it is not an opposite, I would say it is complementing to each other. It is a part of a life. A- and we need to go through all of those phases in our life. You can't have only good experiences, and that is where everyone is getting into pressure, trauma, a lot of problem, because they don't want to leave something which is temporary. The only thing permanent is yourself. Even our family, our friends, everything is temporary. Everything is going to get dissolved at some point of time. Today morning I was writing one more episode of Beyond the Battlefield, and then it was chapter 7, and the same thing came up. that Krishna said that I am the creator and I am the dissolver of everything. But dissolver doesn't mean that he wants to kill everyone. He says that something which has been outdated, you have to upgrade. So everyone is going to get outdated and you have to upgrade. That's what the learning is. So before we sign off, I want to understand one more thing which you talk a lot, that is adaptive resilience. And because most of the people define resilience as a bouncing back. While in Gita, what we have learned is it points towards something very different. It's not about returning to your old self. What Krishna is saying that evolve beyond it. So how has your understanding of resilience changed after everything you have gone through?
So my framework is really called the adaptive resilience framework, and it really posits that life and situations will show you the stress signals, but we choose to ignore those. And going and referencing back to these philosophies that you and I talk about, people often talk about, well, what about karma? Or as Paramahansa Yogananda talked about, the mental picture, the movie that's being shown. What about Maya, illusion? Are we in illusion? And the great sages will tell you, no. The illusion is you thinking that this is it. There's something much more. That's the illusion, but you're actually dealing with life and real situations and real problems. And so the first step in my adaptive resilience is really what I talk about in my TEDx talk. I did a TEDx talk before my cancer relapse, and in it, I use an acronym called ALOHA. In Hawaiian, aloha means hello. So it's a hello to your inner self. It's 7 minutes to wellness. That's the title. How to love your inner stranger. And as you know, for you, that makes sense. For a lot of people, that doesn't make any sense. And I left it ambiguous on purpose because I wanted people to figure out who is the person reflecting back in the mirror to them. Who's actually the one who's conscious, who has that metacognition of the thinking of the thinking. And so the acronym is very simple. A stands for acknowledge where you are and what's actually happening to your life. I was in the hospital. I had cancer. I had a relapse. This is what's actually happening to me. L stands for listening. So listen to your inner self. In Hawaiian, there's a healing modality called huna healing. And in huna healing, the great kahunas believe that the body not only sends sensations, but sends messages, sends consciousness. And so you need to actually talk to it, talk to the different body parts. I call it the three brains, head, heart, and gut. O stands for opening. So open yourself up to this information. Don't be afraid no matter what your belief system is. H stands for harnessing. So harness this information, make the connection, see what works, what doesn't work. And A stands for acting. Act with purpose. Act, and I often say with courage, because it takes courage to act. There is a lot of data that it's not that people don't want to change. They don't know how to change. They don't know if they're thinking about change, wanting change, in change, wanting to go back to relapse. And so that's the key, is to have the courage. And so it's called the Aloha Reboot. It's part of my framework, and it really allows people to come not only to themselves, but actually to see a more objective viewpoint as to what's actually happening in their lives and the situations that are stressing them, to the point of overload of pressure, overload of information, and overload of situations. I think it really behooves us to take these truths and try to see how they apply not only situationally to our problems, but how they actually inform how we actually articulate and wrestle with the big challenges that befall all of us, especially in a world that's fractured right now, where people are not finding connection. I tell people our problem right now is not content. We have loads of content. AI can create content within seconds. Our problem is connection. We see ourselves distant from one another.
Yeah, true. So Savio, we are having a very good discussion, and I really wanted to talk more about your human resolve, your TEDx talk, and many more things. So thank you very much for joining today on Beyond the Battlefield.
Thank you so much, Encore. And I tell anyone listening, especially with the healthcare leaders and leaders that I deal with, is not about surviving the crisis. It's what happens afterwards. How do you find a semblance of yourself through the pressure? And so I just challenge people to find whatever the truth that works for me and you, which is meditation, might not work for others. So prayer, walking, journaling, breathing, whatever it is for you, I behoove you to do that. And if anyone wants to find out more about me, they can actually go to my website, saviopclemente.com, SAVIOPCLEMENTE.com. I have my keynote work there. I have a few more spots left for 2026. I also have my TEDx talk. And then every week I write a Substack newsletter called The Human Resolve, where I talk about head, heart, and gut intelligence, which is the three brains. Right now, I'm currently running an interview series with CEOs and CMOs on the healthcare leadership operating system. And if they want to find me on social media, I'm at The Human Resolve, because Ankur, resolve and resolution is the only two things we have going for us.
Thank you. And all of this info will be there in the intro of the episode, so all the listener and viewers can catch up over there. Thanks, Savio. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Ankur.
If there is one lesson I am taking away from today's conversation, it is this: life does not ask us to control everything. It asks us to meet each moment with greater awareness. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna never promised Arjuna a battlefield without pressure. He offered him something far more valuable: clarity within the pressure. And today, Savio reminded us of the very same truth: that resilience is not about pretending to be strong. It is not about suppressing fear. It is not even about bouncing back to who we were before. It is about becoming someone new through the experience. It is about learning how to stay present when life feels uncertain, how to remain open when suffering arrives, and how to keep moving forward, one conscious step at a time. Whether you are leading a team, building a business, supporting a family, recovering from a setback, or simply navigating a difficult season of life, remember, performance doesn't fail first. Clarity does. And clarity begins the moment we stop running from our inner battlefield. Savio, thank you for sharing your wisdom, your vulnerability, and your remarkable journey with us today. It has been an absolute privilege having you on Beyond the Battlefield. And to all our listeners, thank you for spending this time with us. If this conversation resonated with you, please share it with someone who may need it. Subscribe to Beyond the Battlefield so you never miss an episode. And we'd love to hear your reflections, questions, and stories. You can write to us at beyondthebattlefield@outlook.in. And don't forget to explore our Beyond the Battlefield GPT companion link in the episode description for deeper learning and reflection. Until next time, stay curious, stay aware, and remember, the battlefield was never outside. It was always within. See you in the next episode.